Let's face it, the North Pole isn't exactly a tropical paradise, and heating a massive workshop full of underpaid elves costs a fortune in this economy. You think Santa is spending his hard-earned cookie dough on premium oak logs? Hell no. He is sitting on a mountain of free flammable garbage paper. Every year, millions of greedy little rugrats mail him their demands for PlayStations and hoverboards, creating the single largest untapped biomass fuel source on planet Earth. Imagine the smell of burning crayon wax and desperation as Big Red tosses a stack of "I promise I was good" notes into the furnace. It is efficient, it is brutal, and honestly, it is the only way those little dudes are surviving the sub-zero temperatures up in that Arctic wasteland. So grab a drink and strap in, because we are about to calculate exactly how many wish lists it takes to roast a reindeer steak medium rare. Let's break down the math, because numbers don't lie, even if your drunk uncle definitely does, about how much he can bench press. If there are 2 billion kids on Earth and half of them write a letter, that is 1 billion sheets of processed tree carcass. A standard sheet of paper weighs about 5 grams, which means we are looking at roughly 5 million kilograms of pure, unadulterated, flammable entitlement. That is enough kinetic energy to launch a Tesla into orbit or keep a fat guy in a red velvet suit warm for decades. But not all paper is created equal, because some of you cheapskates are sending letters on napkins, while others use heavy cardstock with glitter. Let's talk about the glitter for a second, because that stuff is basically microplastic herpes that never goes away and releases toxic fumes. The elves probably have to wear hazmat suits just to toss little Timmy's glitter-bombed demand for a pony into the main boiler room furnace. Paper burns at 451 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ironic because that is also the temperature of my mixtapes dropping next week. A single pound of paper generates about 3,000 BTUs of heat, which is barely enough to toast a marshmallow or warm your hands. To heat a workshop the size of an Amazon fulfillment center in the Arctic Circle, Santa needs to burn about 4 tons per hour. That means they are torching roughly 800,000 letters every single day, just to keep the conveyor belts from freezing into solid blocks. You might think Santa reads these things, but let's be real. Nobody has time to decode the chicken scratch of an illiterate 6-year-old. The mailroom is likely a high-speed industrial shredder feeding directly into an incinerator that powers the lights and the espresso machine for the elves. Imagine the emotional damage of an elf watching a letter asking for a kidney for grandma, getting chucked into the fire to warm soup. It is dark, twisted, and hilarious, because nothing says Merry Christmas like sacrificing sentimental value for the sake of basic thermodynamics and survival. We have to consider the chemical composition of crayon wax, because that stuff is basically petroleum jelly mixed with disappointment and cheap factory dyes. Burning a stack of crayon drawings probably creates a thick, colorful smoke that smells like a burnt daycare center and tastes like purple rain. The EPA would have a field day up there, but since the North Pole is international waters, Santa can pollute as much as he wants. I bet the smoke coming out of the chimney changes color depending on whether they are burning markers, crayons, or fancy scented gel pens. Now let's pivot to the angry letters from the Karen moms who are mad that their kid didn't get the specific Lego set requested. These letters are written with such pure, unadulterated rage that they probably burn hot enough to melt steel beams or fuse bone to metal. Santa definitely saves the angry hate mail for the coldest nights of the year when the wind chill hits minus 80 degrees below zero. There is something poetic about using the hatred of suburban parents to keep the workshop cozy while the elves toil away making wooden trains. We haven't even discussed the envelopes yet, which add a significant amount of biomass and usually contain saliva from licking the glue strip shut. That is billions of dried spit samples being vaporized into the air, creating a biological hazard that would make the CDC scream in terror. If a kid has the flu and licks the envelope, Santa is basically aerosolizing the virus and pumping it through the workshop ventilation system. No wonder the elves look so pale and sickly in all the movies. They are breathing in vaporized flu strains and burnt construction paper. Compared to coal, paper burns fast and dirty, so the stokers have to be shoveling that fan mail constantly without a single coffee break. It is a volume game requiring a massive logistical operation just to move the paper from the mail chutes to the furnace room floor. They probably have a specialized team of swole elves whose only job is to bench press sacks of mail and hurl them into flames. Forget making toys, the most important job at the North Pole is the guy who decides which country's mail gets burned on Tuesday morning. What about the genuinely sweet letters from kids who just want peace on Earth, or for their dad to come back from getting milk? Those are the hardest to burn, but thermal units don't care about your feelings or your tragic backstory involving a hamster named Mr. Whiskers. Santa probably has to dissociate, completely chugging eggnog, until he is numb enough to toss a tearjerker letter into the roaring inferno of capitalism. It is a savage business model, but when you live on an ice cap, sentimentality is the first thing to freeze and break off. On the big night, the sleigh needs a massive boost to get off the ground, essentially requiring a fan mail afterburner for takeoff. They likely compress millions of letters into high-density fuel pellets that burn with the intensity of 1,000 suns to get those reindeer moving. Rudolph is not guiding the sleigh with his nose, he is running away from the terrifying jet of flame shooting out the back exhaust. The propulsion system is literally powered by the dreams of children, which is the most metal thing I have ever heard in my life. After burning a billion letters, you are left with a mountain of ash that has to go somewhere, probably dumped into the Arctic Ocean. This explains why the ice caps are melting. It is not global warming. It is Santa dumping hot ash into the water like a jerk. The polar bears are probably swimming through a slurry of gray sludge that used to be lists asking for Nintendo Switches and Barbie dream houses. It is an ecological disaster zone up there, all because Santa is too cheap to install a solar panel or a wind turbine. Wait, we forgot about the stamps, which are technically currency in some prisons, but up there they are just sticky little squares of fuel. The adhesive on the back of stamps burns with a weird chemical smell that probably makes the elves see sounds and hear colors. That explains why the toy designs get so weird. Sometimes the design team is high on burning postage fumes and lack of sleep. Remember the Furby? That terrifying robot owl was definitely invented by an elf who had inhaled too much smoke from burning international priority mail. Handling that much paper is a safety nightmare, and I guarantee paper cuts are the leading cause of hospitalization in the North Pole Infirmary. Imagine diving into a pile of sharp envelopes and coming out looking like you wrestled a cheese grater and lost badly to it. They probably don't even have band-aids, they just slap some duct tape on the cuts and tell the elves to get back to work. The sheer amount of blood mixed in with the mail before it gets burned adds a nice iron scent to the workshop ambience. Parents tell kids that Santa replies to letters, but that is a lie because he destroyed the evidence 5 minutes after it arrived. Any reply you got was written by your mom at the kitchen table while she drank wine and regretted her life choices that year. Santa is strictly a one-way communication channel, receiving fuel and dispensing plastic junk, creating a perfect circle of consumerism and waste management. Some of you nerds are going to say, but what about email? And to that I say, shut up you buzzkill, nobody likes you. You cannot burn an email, which means digital kids are actually freezing the elves to death with their paperless demands and lack of foresight. Every time you hit send on an email to Santa, an elf shivers uncontrollably and has to huddle against a reindeer for warmth. Paper letters are literally saving lives up there, so stop trying to be eco-friendly and start scribbling your demands on heavy construction paper. The scariest part is January, when the mail stops coming and the fuel supply creates a massive energy crisis for the entire operation. They probably have to start burning the unsold toys, tossing wooden ducks and rejected dolls into the fire just to keep from freezing solid. It becomes a survival horror movie where they burn the furniture and maybe even the slow elves who cannot run fast enough to escape. This is the dark lore they do not put in the holiday specials because it would traumatize the youth and ruin merchandise sales. So there you have it. The ugly truth behind the magic that totally ruins your childhood memories of sugar plums and flying reindeer forever. Santa is not some jolly saint, he is a cold-blooded pyromaniac running a thermal power plant fueled by the raw innocence of gullible children. While you sleep soundly, he is stoking the fires of industry with your heartfelt scribbles, laughing as your glitter glue turns to ash. It makes you look at that chimney a little differently, knowing it is basically an industrial exhaust port for incinerated hopes and dreams. Next time you sit down to write your list, stop being selfish and think about the thermal output of your paper choice, amateur. Don't send a flimsy email or a postcard, send a heavy phone book soaked in premium lighter fluid to keep the workshop warm. Do it for the elves, because if you don't provide the fuel, they might end up getting tossed into the furnace as kindling. Let's stop pretending this holiday is about giving and admit it is strictly about thermodynamic survival in a frozen, godforsaken Arctic wasteland. If we all switch to digital wish lists, the North Pole freezes over by next Tuesday, and Christmas is canceled permanently, folks. So keep those letters coming, keep them heavy, and maybe add some sawdust inside the envelope to really get that fire roaring hot. Because nothing says, "I love you, Santa," quite like providing the combustible materials necessary to prevent him from dying of hypothermia tonight.